If you notice, my voice has changed a little bit. It's because I've been very sick these last 4 days. I've been calling out of work. I had I had diagnosed with pink eye on Monday, and I
Yet he's
woke
on
up
video.
and I'm on video right now. And we're about to talk about X Men '97. You might think I'm like Scott Summers when he takes off his sunglasses, and I might fry you through the screen. But no, that's not the case. This is my PEP, my Pink Eye podcast, right? And I'm going to bring it, Ricky. I'm about to bring it. But if I do crack my voice, we're gonna ignore it. You can laugh, you can snicker. I'm editing it out. But since I
Fair
brought up
enough.
Scott Summers, we have to talk about X Men '97. Ricky Flex, much anticipated continuation of the legendary animated series from the 90s. It's currently fresh on Rotten Tomatoes at 100% from the critics. It's described as a near perfect return for the animated series with fresh, relevant ideas and inventive animation from the Rotten Tomatoes website. Ricky Flicks. We talked about the anticipation. We broke down the trailer. What were your initial reactions? Did it live up to expectations?
Yeah, these expectations were high. Like before these reviews were coming in, I was just gonna be like, "Wow, I can't wait to see this." You know, a little nostalgia from my childhood, a show that I loved. Like it's just gonna be nice to watch this and just relax and not have to think about the MCU and that debacle right now, superhero fatigue, Disney Plus shows failing, this and that. Now that these reviews are in, I went in here with a critical lens. Okay, and I'll tell you what, this was pretty damn good. Like I have few like negatives to say about this. Very few. Like 30-minute long episodes, crisp, sharp. Theme song intro hit so freaking hard, like holy nostalgia. The Marvel animation, they have a banner now, which is interesting, but just looking at what shows were there just made me laugh a little bit. But to start out with episode 1 with the title "To Me, My X-Men," Charles
Oof.
Xavier last line for the X-Men 9 season 5 finale. Like holy crap. And then it's just a pure continuation like we knew it was going to be of trying to execute the professor's vision. And like I was bought in right when that theme song hit. But if you weren't like let's say like you had a more critical lens on it, I think the first episode was a great starter episode. Like I won't go through every single thing, but all in all, like this was incredibly good. You tweeted out one of the probably the best action set piece that there was with Scott or Cyclops dropping down. Like that was unbelievable.
Superhero landing. Holy shit.
But to the max, like, and again, it's Cyclops. This isn't freaking the Batman. It's Cyclops. Like, dude, this had it all. Like, again, I have some negatives, but overall, like, this did live up to the hype.
When you had Scott Summers do that superhero landing after like soft landing from his own lasers, right? You had no idea like who's gonna bring him down, who's gonna carry him. Is Storm gonna like carry him like a baby and drop him on the ground? And he's just so casual and cool. He lasers softens the landing, and then boom, you got like the great bright blue suit with the yellow X, and you got like the hair swathing everywhere. I was like, damn, they're bringing it. They're bringing it. I'm like, I do not remember a scene like that in the X-Men animated series growing up. And then after that, Ricky Flex, like the superhero ness of it all, the team behind him, and he says the famous Charles Xavier line, and he goes, "To me, my X-Men." And when I heard that, I started to think, if this show hits and it relives the glory days for an older audience, but introduces a new audience to the X-Men, a younger audience, is that going to become the Avengers Assemble? You know,
No,
in
no,
the future.
that's too iconic. That's too like that was a $2 billion movie for God's sakes. Like this isn't
Yeah,
gonna.
we talk about a couple MCU eras down the line, and we talk about the X Men have the opportunity to rejuvenate the MCU, and I think like that one goes pretty hard. I'm just saying that's going to be something that people like. That's an argument for the future. But I agree with you, Ricky Flex. Me in my 28-year-old body, I felt like I was transported back to my 7-year-old body, right? Watching that theme song, watching that intro, and we pick up right where we left off. We go with the death of Professor X, and this is where I'm starting to think like, man, this really is for people our age, because when you think of the X-Men, who's part of the X-Men? Like the first names you think of: Wolverine, Professor X. Like you think of those two immediately, and you probably think of Magneto, even though he's not really a part of the team, obviously, but he is at the beginning of this series. So what I was like going through is like, I'm really digging this. as someone who grew up with the X-Men. Even LeBron James was tweeting about how he wanted to watch it, how he grew up with the show. But I'm wondering, is it still going to like hit with younger audiences? And I think it will, because you're going to have people that are my age, probably a little bit older, that are showing it to their kids. And so not only are they living their glory days and they're watching like a revamped version that has better action. Animation is a questionable point. I don't know if it has better animation or whatever, but it keeps the nostalgic vibes, but also keeps the same dynamics of how the X-Men look like. And then you have them show it to their kids, and their kids are like, wow, I can't wait to see this in live action. I think you're really doing something cool, you know? But I think I really had a question. I want to throw it to you. Is this more for people our age? Is it for younger people, or is it a mix of both?
This is first and foremost, this is definitely more for people our age and the nostalgia factor. Just you could tell by watching the show, like just the mere fact that it's a continuation of a story from the 90s, right?
Yeah.
And two, they're keeping, yes, the animation is a little better and more advanced. We are in 2024 versus 1997, but it is like that action set piece that we talked about with Cyclops dropping down. Like that's better than probably anything from the 90s show. It's just clearer. The animation's just fresher, cleaner, everything. So I will say, like, it still has that feel, that handcrafted animation feel, but it is improvement. And I guess, like, for me, I won't say kids won't like this just because superheroes, it has good action, and it's, has a good, as a team, it's a team show, right? And has good relationships throughout. It's what the X-Men are, all these different relationships. I think, though, that, like, look at kids, what they're watching today. Like, anime's big. How's that animation translate to this? I think
Yeah.
they'll favor anime. And I don't think that they'll fall in love with this. But if you're a superhero fan, you will, which a lot are from the MCU's rise the past 15 years or so. So, and all basically what I'm trying to say is it's more for us, but it is also for kids. But I just don't think it's as much for kids as people think when they think, oh, it's an animated show, action show. I just think it's a little less than that. But going one last thing before pass it on to you is I think this show is going to be massive for the MCU and the live action because I think it will convert some people that were out on the MCU or like were kids in the 90s watching the show. They weren't into the MCU or have fallen off with the MCU superhero fatigue. They'll come back for the X-Men now. The live action post 21st century, in the 21st century, Bryan Singer post those movies. They're going to see this and then the live action, which is going to be more like this vibe versus Bryan Singer. And they're going to be like, I'm in on the X-Men and you're going to get more fans from that. And so I see this as a great stepping stone to the MCU as well.
Yeah, I definitely think it's more for us, but obviously it can be for kids too, just because of the continuation aspect. And like if a young kid is watching the X-Men, like you want to see Professor X. It's so weird to not have Professor X if you're learning who the X-Men are. Um, I also got the vibe the show was a little bit edgier than the 90s animated series. And that could, it's like the violence, I think, could be translated there. Or at least, I guess that you can look at the fighting sequences in the second episode. What comes to mind is the Magneto on trial and the insurrection that happens. Um, I still think the themes are pretty easy to understand for either a kid or an adult, but it's nice that they kept that same vibe from the animated series from the 90s. But yeah, I did get a sense it's a little edgier. Even you had like they were even on their soap opera bullshit with Magneto and Rogue and Gambit sitting on the side. I'm like, man, we got love triangles here. But that's also what makes the X-Men so good. It's like the
Exactly.
the interconnected relationships between the characters. Like you have Wolverine, Cyclops, and Jean, and you have Jean pregnant with Scott's kid, but Wolverine is driving Jean to the hospital. You know, those type of like moments. I even thought the show did a really nice job with Jubilee. And what I don't know if a lot of people noticed it. If you ever watched the first episode of X-Men the animated series, it was about Jubilee being saved by the X-Men and recruited and joining the X-Men. First episode of X-Men 97, Jubilee is looking at this other mutant, Alberto, and she is trying to convince him that the
Roberto.
X-Men, what is it?
Roberto.
Oh, did I say Alberto?
Yeah.
Roberto is should join the X-Men. And it's like a totally flip full circle type of moment. And I thought that was a nice little like wink wink to the audience, like for true fans. I thought that was a perfect way to start this new season. And then the kind of level up from the first episode, because I was like, damn, they freaking nailed it. And then the second episode introduced like you have the cliffhanger of Magneto at the end, and I think Magneto kind of steals the show in the second episode. And I thought he had some great monologues. He felt powerful. Like he fills the void of Professor X when he's not there. I think I really am unsure of what his future is going to be with the group. We assume that he's going to turn to the evil side, and you assume that Professor X is going to come back. But I don't know. The show has me on my toes right now. But I would say Magneto really brought it in the second episode, Ricky Flex, and kind of shocked by the Rogue reveal.
The Rogue reveal was something. I did not expect that either. And as in like in the show. And yeah, Magneto owned that second episode. Like he did. And there's another person that we'll get to that I think, co-pilot or, second in command there that did second star, I should say, of the episode. But yeah, Magneto's just a different force, man. Even in animated form, this animated form Magneto is awesome. I always love this animated form. And this, again, was just a great reminder. Even without a Professor X, even without that banter with his best friend, he's still great, even on his own. So that, and just to go back to what you're saying about the team dynamics, I guess we'll get to because we're hyping up this show a lot, which as we should, because it is great. You mentioned two words that I wrote down: soap opera. Soap opera. Yeah, holy crap, dude. Like the b-ball court scenes, I felt like we were in a rom-com for a second. You know how every rom-com has a b-ball court? Like this show, man, like yes, the team dynamics, the relationships. That's why like we love team movies. We love like groups, the dynamics and everything, right? But also it's like, holy crap, are we in the Flash? Like the Netflix
That
or
felt
whatever.
like the 90s, the most like 90s X-Men, like end of the episode type of scene. That felt like X-Men 90s.
Yes. Like it's like we're on the basketball court, and then Gene and Cyclops, when they're picking teams, are like, "Oh, by the way, we're leaving. Oh, there's Magneto." Like what? Like it's like holy crap, and like it's just a constant carousel of freaking soap operas going around, and that's the thing that when you get into team type of movies or shows, that's the little drawback here. And I mentioned the Flash, the CW show. It felt like CW a bit. So I didn't like that, but that's pretty much my only big gripe with this.
I guess like that scene really does stick out. I laughed when I saw like Scott with the basketball and him on the court with everybody. I'm like, I just cannot see him as a baller. I see him more maybe as a football guy. Like I can't see him hooping really out there. And then like this, you mentioned like the soap opera CW type of feel, but I also felt like the stakes felt extremely high for the first two episodes, where it's like Scott in the first episode is trying to take on the mantle as a leader of the X-Men. He feels like he has a responsibility to carry on what Professor X has laid as a foundation for the X-Men, and him feeling that stress. And then you have Jean element dynamic of her with Child saying they should leave the X-Men, like, oh, throw a wrinkle in there. And then Scott's like, we have this responsibility. But at the end of the episode, what do you get? Oh, it's Magneto saying, oh, guess who left the X-Men to me? Charles Xavier. And it's like, holy shit. Like, it's just like so many, it keeps you on your toes the entire time. But that was just like something where I just felt myself locked in. And even with Storm, like Storm is like a dynamic. She is like the support system for Jean. She's someone to lean on. And Storm is saying and supporting Jean with her saying she might leave the X-Men. And she says, think on it and things like that. What do we get in episode 2? Storm is the one who ends up losing her powers and leaving the X-Men. It's like shit like that. I'm like, hey, the writing does like it has you like on your toes, like I'm talking about. And I thought Storm was great in the second episode too. And
that's who I was referring to.
Amazing hair, by the way. Like everyone that animated this was doing something right with the hair. You can make comparisons to anime and how it can't live up to what we see today, but I'll tell you what, the look of the characters are freaking phenomenal. You got Flo Sidon with Magneto. He doesn't have to wear the helmet without Professor X anymore, right? You can let it rage. You got Scott Summers with the frat boy, fuck boy type of haircut with the sunglasses. You got Storm with the punk rock type of look, but still like keeps it in form, keeps it in shape. Everyone just looks amazing. And the suits, they're great. I need to see these in live action. I don't, I'm not a purist when it comes to animation, but I was a fan overall of how this looked. And I'm not going to like pull gripes if someone is speaking and their mouth doesn't go directly to what the words are saying, right? It's not matched up or synced up perfectly. It's an animated show. And you want to see, like, if it worked in the 90s, go back and watch those episodes, right? I guarantee you they put more effort here than they did back there. So I'm not going to be a purist in that. I don't think it's that much of a, it's not that great of a gripe. I think you're trying to be too much of a hardo if you really rip on it for that. But I thought overall I was satisfied with the way it looked.
Yeah, I totally agree. Like if you say that, then like you have a problem with Invincible. You know, you have a problem with all like almost like like you have a problem with anime. Like that's just not going to happen with the style. You know, the animation style here. Um, I do want to say too that like we talked about the corniness and the corniness and you know the soap opera feel. And I guess like I was saying how great of a nostalgia trip this was these first two episodes. Do you think it's also a problem? Like it's too reliant on it?
I don't know if it's too reliant. Like we have, like I wasn't going to watch this just because of the storyline following the end of X-Men, the animated series. You know, I wasn't like going to return. I was thinking this could look cool, right? I want to hear the theme song again. Um, I think it's a nice ramp up. It's interesting to have Marvel like carrying this property now, the MCU, and putting it to animation and get you excited for the future. Uh, I think it really just carries on like the comic book legacy of X-Men. I think that's the most important thing. And that's like where the inter group dynamics I think is so important and what separates like X-Men from like the Avengers. Like I think because these characters they seem like they've known each other forever, right? And
Hmm.
they respond differently to different situations with different like people involved, you know? So I don't like for me, I think it's as long as it's like nostalgic for fans in general. You know, I just think like I don't think it was over lenient on it. Maybe just the storyline. I don't know.
Yeah, because I think it maybe a little bit like not to go back to our kids' conversation, but like for us again, for us and older people that grew up on this show, like they're gonna come back because of that nostalgia. That's fine with it. But and again, also with the animation, fine with it, right? But new kids again think they're watching anime. What is this show? The handcrafted animation type of like characters, right? Reminds you of a comic book. How many kids are watching comic book or reading comic books nowadays? I don't know. I don't think it matters for Spider Verse because it's Spider Man, already a huge superhero. The X Men I know are as well, but like the Bryan Singer movies not haven't really weren't really connected for kids, and it's been a long time versus Spider Man. So I don't know like how much of that. I guess that's what I'm trying to say. It's like I don't know if the animation is gripping people that didn't have that nostalgia factor already, but you brought back that animation style because basically this is a continuation and you're not updating it because of that nostalgia.
I think you have a built-in fan base for the MCU. You know, even if they're younger, like I think they're going to watch it, right? Despite not knowing much about the X-Men, they know they're important, even if they haven't read the comic books. It's the goddamn X-Men. You know, it's like Fantastic Four. Like they may have not seen a Fantastic Four movie, but they know how important the Fantastic Four are and how they might not know how important they're going to be for the future. But like if Marvel's making it and they hear the words X-Men, they're going to be like, oh wow, and the like potential continuity with the live action uh like MCU. Who knows? Because sometimes they do that type of stuff, multiverse of madness, like borrowing from What If and things like that. Um, I just think people have a built-in like I'm going to watch this because it's the MCU, even if it's been sour and animation hasn't been great for Marvel. I think people are still going to watch it just because of the name brand.
Yeah, that's a good point.